With that new direction, we set upon looking for a coach that could really take us and lead us in that direction. What we were looking for was a leader, and that was probably the most important aspect of what we were looking for, as opposed to what we've seen a lot of the other teams looking for offensive-minded coaches because of the success of Sean McVay and some of the other great offensive minds. But to me, you start an organization by finding a great leader. And I'm really thrilled to say that I believe we have found that leader that can really take us into the future.
Welcome into the latest episode of the 5 Reasons Podcast. I'm Ethan Skolnick here, as always, with Chris Whittingham. Different location today. Chris and I don't always tape together, but we decided to come out to the Brian Flores press conference here at Dolphins camp, and the folks here at Davie were kind enough to set us up outside on the picnic tables right outside the bleachers. So if you hear a little background noise, you hear some planes going by, that's not Brian Flores deciding to leave town and go back to New England. He's still here. He actually just walked by us after we left the auditorium where the press conference was, and we'll get to all the details of that here in a second. Now that you've found us, make sure you hit the subscribe or follow button on your favorite podcast provider. Also, check out all the 5 Reasons Sports podcasts. There are 15 of ours now. All you got to do is type that into your favorite podcast provider. That's 5 Reasons Sports. All of them will come up. Make sure that you subscribe to those to get those as well. We've got Miami Heat Beat, 3 yards per carry, is also going to be posting tonight as we tape this. So we have dueling podcasts today. No British voices on this unless Whittingham decides to crawl back into his Nigel voice. I'm going to try to avoid that. But also, again, check out Chamber Podcast. Out for the Count. We'll be back soon. Goldie on Ice put out an episode. Steve Goldstein on the Panthers last week. And Craig Mish, we're gearing up for spring training. We're going to have 6 different people in our network up at Marlin Spring Training. We're also going to have 3 people from our network, including myself, along with Nikias Duncan and Leif. We call him Lefty Leif, but actually Greg Sylvander. We're all going to be at the All-Star Game in Charlotte now that Dwayne Wade has been announced as a special selection for the game. So the 3 of us will be up there. Nobody else in this market that I believe is sending more than 1. So we're going to have 3 people up there to cover everything with Dwayne's last All-Star Game. All right, let's get to it, Chris. Going to get to this press conference. This podcast isn't going to be that long, but it will probably be longer than the presser, which was not particularly long. I've been to a bunch of these. I was here in 1996 when Jimmy Johnson was introduced. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
I was here in 2000 when Dave Wannstedt officially took over. That was weird because of the way that things went with Jimmy last year when Dave was kind of here already and sort of coaching the team, and they lost 62-7, and Jay Fiedler threw a touchdown against them, and it was Marino's last game. And here's Dave Wannstedt as your head coach in the post-Marino era. So that one was significant. I was also here for the interims, Jim Bates, Todd Bowles, Dan Campbell. I was here for Tony Sperano. Before we get to Sperano, Nick Saban in 2005. That was eventful. That was a big deal. That was supposed to make the Dolphins the Patriots for the 14 years that followed. It didn't happen.
And they're having a go at it again 14 years later.
Saban's in Alabama. That lasted 2 seasons. He was never going to be the Alabama coach. So he's here for that one. I was here for I don't even call it the Sperano press conference. It was the Parcells press conference. It was his grand introduction. I think Parcells spoke for 40 minutes before Jeff Ireland or Tony Sperano even took the stage.
Rarely is the head coach the undercard of a new head coach being introduced is the undercard of the press conference.
Yeah, and it was that year. And all I remember was over and over and over, there are catchphrases from every press conference, and that one was tough, smart, disciplined. To the point that they put that up in the auditorium that we were there that we're in there today. And of course, Joe Philbin. I missed that one. I was told that was a good thing, actually, because not much was said during that one. And then obviously we had the Adam Gase one. I was there for that. During that one, he did not see dancing tacos. His eyes were not all over the place, and we thought he was the next genius head coach. So here we are again, 13th head coach in Dolphins history. Rather remarkable considering the fact that up until from 1966 until 1996, 30 years, there were two head coaches.
So 11 and 22?
11 and 22. So it was George Wilson, and then it was
Shula.
Don Shula. and that was it.
Yeah.
Okay? Until Shula got run out of town.
We were kind of on the Pittsburgh Steelers track for a while.
This was one of the most stable organizations in sports. This was the Miami Heat, the San Antonio Spurs, the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
That's what the Miami Dolphins were. They are not that anymore. They are the Arizona Cardinals. They are the Sacramento Kings.
Yeah.
Okay? And so how are you going to get out of this? And so here's my takeaway from today. We'll get to some of the points from Brian Flores. The key word today, well, start here. He's understated. We're going to say that.
Right.
Really understated. Really pleasant, it seems. Family guy.
Great story.
Great story. Had his kids. His 2 adorable kids were out there with him today. His wife was out there with him today. I'll give you a little anecdote. So he walked by us here. He doesn't know us, right? Came over, shake our hands, okay, on the way back.
Got our names, made sure, yeah.
Looked us in the eye, okay, in case he ends up working with us at some point or we end up being down here. So, you always look for those kind of things early. It gives you a sense of who he is, but incredibly understated. But the key word that I heard over and over today, from Steve Ross speaking first to Chris Greer to Brian Flores, was aligned. That was the word of the day, as we say on the Light Skin Opinions podcast with Christopher Maddox. Aligned, okay? Yeah. They want to make it clear that we've killed them. We're not the only ones, but everybody has killed this organization for doing things in a half-ass fashion. They didn't totally blow it up, but they got as close as you could,
We're
right?
like 3/4 of the way.
3/4 of the way with Chris Greer in charge. And so the idea is they're trying to align the organization with people who are like-minded in this regard. Before we get to the specifics of what Flores, Ross, and Greer in a sidebar later said, what was your takeaway?
My takeaway was, frankly, how little his previous work was discussed. Because, I mean, as much as the Adam Gase era didn't work out in the end, I remember you talk about sort of your relationships with previous press conference. The one that I most vividly remember is I was anchoring the live coverage for 790 on the day of Adam Gase's press conference. And I was there, and they put me on this assignment 24 hours earlier, and I'm trying to figure out what direction am I going to go. I talked to someone from Chicago who was telling me about how great the work he had done, the malleability and the flexibility of his work with Jay Cutler, and we were talking about all these different things about what he had done. There was very little emphasis on what he has done with the New England Patriots because that question is very murky, isn't it? Right, is that we don't know. Right. And so, I mean, think about in any other context, right? Let's say, the Los Angeles Rams had scored 45 points yesterday and won the Super Bowl. Wouldn't the Cincinnati Bengals, who are introducing their head coach today, Zach Taylor, the quarterback coach, wouldn't a lot of the discussion be what did you take from McVay and what have you done with the quarterback position? We were talking about it last night in our group DM. CK was trying to big up what Flores had done in the game because the play calling was so good defensively from the New England Patriots. They only allowed 3 points. Why wasn't all of the discussion about, holy crap, dude, your side of the ball last night only allowed 3 points in the biggest game of the year. It made the Super Bowl as boring as it gets, but I mean it's a testament to how good your defense was. Why don't we give him the credit of having coordinated an all-time defensive performance in the history of football? I mean, yesterday's game.
Romo didn't yesterday.
Right. It was all Belichick,
and
that's the thing. I wanted at some point, and maybe we will at some point. I wanted to hear from Brian Flores. What was your responsibility for doing that? What was your role in doing that? What does your day-to-day look like? And obviously, Bill Belichick is a defensive guy. He's well involved with the defense, but, I mean, he is the head coach that's in charge of everything. Are we just going to say that Bill Belichick was responsible for that? I kind of wanted to leave today with a sense of what was your role in that? Because all the time, we judge head coaching hires on their previous work, and yet for Brian Flores, that question is so murky that we really don't have the answer to that question even still.
Yeah, and I think that is because of this respect for Belichick, where it's always his responsibility when it's good, but it's never his fault when it's bad, right? So, last year, Belichick decided in the Super Bowl not to play his best quarterback, without explaining it to anybody.
Right, and still hasn't.
And still hasn't explained it and completely got away with it. So the guy ran off to Tennessee for more money and then ran back a touchdown against the Dolphins, right? it's never been explained, and it's like nobody seems to care. It was Malcolm Butler. And so I just think this is the Belichick mystique that we don't want to give anybody else any credit. I was surprised with Romo yesterday, honestly, though, because he's so good and so plugged in on those meetings. They met with Brian Flores, like, why was he crediting Belichick all the time? And so,
well, maybe it's because he left with the sense that Belichick is actually the one that knows all this stuff.
Do you think it's possible? This would be a great question to have been asked today. But do you think it's possible that Belichick was concerned that Flores might be distracted in some way? I mean, it could be. Oh, it's your first Super Bowl, and I've done this before. It also could be that you're going to be the head coach of another team. You're trying to get your family down to South Florida. I mean, this was a really quick turnaround. Think about this. That game ended last night at 10 o'clock, okay? They weren't off the field. Like, Tracy Wolfson was still chasing Tom Brady, okay, at 10:15, 10:20. And so, then you have that, and then you got to get your family. It wasn't just him flying down alone and the family coming after.
They've definitely been assembling a staff because we already basically know what the staff is.
Even though he wouldn't really confirm it today. Right, but they have been putting a staff together, including guys from the Patriots.
Correct.
They stole the assistant quarterbacks coach from the Patriots to come down here, hoping that Tom Brady magic will rub off, just like the Aaron Rodgers magic and the Peyton Manning magic wore off, rubbed off. So and worked so well for the Dolphins.
The Phillip Rivers magic too was thrown in there too.
Oh yeah, the Phillip Rivers magic, right? Well, the Phillip Rivers magic was Norv Turner when he was back here way back when. But
it was Cam Cameron, right?
It was Cam Cameron, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's always the guy who's next to the quarterback, standing next to the quarterback. But look,
so I guess the question is, was Flores the guy standing next to Belichick?
I don't know. I didn't get any sense of it today, and I guess that's my broader point about today. Other than this align thing,
which we should get into,
is that Steve Ross's message when he came out, other than making a lame joke about a lot of people here, it's almost like we won the Super Bowl. He's not great at these things, but it
doesn't have to be.
He doesn't have to be, but it is what it is. He's friendly enough. But the funny thing about it was, he comes out and he did address one thing, which is that one of the questions that has come up during the coaching search was other teams have clearly been looking for a particular type of coach. So an offensive coach, for the most part, the next McVay. Didn't look so great last night, but whatever. The next McVay.
Next Reed, next Sean Payton.
Right.
And you look at the final 8 in the playoffs, obviously, the defensive guy is the one that won in the end, and defense won the Super Bowl, but I think 7 of the last 8 coaches all came from offensive backgrounds. When you look at Garrett and Peterson.
And I think the top 4 offenses in the league were the last 4 offenses left.
Right. So the league is trending offense, and the Dolphins didn't do that. Now,
they interviewed one of the guys. They interviewed Eric Bieniemy.
Yeah.
So it's not like they didn't look at it.
Right. Like they were looking at offensive coaches, but to me, I think it more kind of, I don't know if Stephen Ross said that because he's trying to accentuate that we're doing the different thing and kind of making it like this is why we're thinking different than everyone else. We think everyone else is wrong. Does he say that because that's how he's trying to sell it, and leadership is the way that you sell this hire? Why do you think he made it a point? And obviously that sentence that he said has very much been part of the national conversation. Like, if you are friends with Sean McVay, it was included, it had jumped the shark when that sentence was actually included in the Arizona Cardinals press release for Cliff Kingsbury. He's friends with Sean McVay.
Right.
Any relationship to him. And so, do you think that Ross took in that part of the lexicon and was either trying to sell it or was trying to differentiate what the Dolphins did compared to everyone else?
I think he's trying to differentiate from what he's done before. So if you look at the last 2 coaches, they were hired because they were offensive minds, right? And Sperano I don't count because he was an offensive coordinator, offensive line coach, but it was the Parcells philosophy, which is a defensive-minded philosophy. But they
started with an offensive tackle in the draft. That's what they were trying to do.
Correct. But the last 2 head coaches, it was Philbin, standing next to Aaron Rodgers, and it was Gase standing next to Peyton Manning. And so I think it failed miserably. They've had terrible offenses. They picked the wrong quarterback, and they stayed with the wrong quarterback too long. Okay, and so I think he's trying to differentiate from what he's done before, and to make it clear. And also, I think he's trying to point out something that Flores painted as a positive, and I think it is, that he's worked in so many different jobs with the Patriots, but that you and I have painted as a question mark because he hasn't done one job for that long, and he has never really been in charge of anything until this year, and he didn't even have the title. And so I think Ross is trying to say, leader, this is what we identified in him. Now, I'll say this, okay? if he's a leader, and I don't doubt it because his players seem to respond to him, he's not the kind of leader we think of typically, right? Because when you say leader, this thing comes to fans' minds of rah-rah.
Sure.
You know, it would have been a much different press conference than someone who up there today.
Commanding presence.
And he doesn't have that.
No.
He doesn't have that. Now, I never felt Adam Gase had it either. I mean, he wore the hat down, right? I mean, he fidgeted. I mean, even before the weird Jets press conference,
right.
He never commanded the room. The coaches who've commanded the room here, Nick Saban commands a freaking room, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, whatever you think of him, there's a fear of asking Nick Saban the wrong question, okay? And then Bill Parcells in charge, commanded room. Tony Sparano was much more mild-mannered than sort of the Tony Sparano, look of him, okay? So I don't think that he did. Philbin clearly did not, right? Did not command a room at all. I think that what they're going to try to differentiate between this guy and Philbin is that this guy commands the room behind the scenes.
Sure.
And it does seem, in terms of dealing with positions, and that was another of my problems with Philbin, and that's why I don't like quarterback coaches as head coaches generally. I know this has moved away from it, and Peyton and McVay, etc., but they're dealing with a very small room. Quarterback coaches don't deal with. They have to align themselves in some ways with the offensive line room and with the receiver room, but their core room is really like hardcore study with really two guys, because you're not even really preparing the third guy if you got him, or he's a practice squad guy these days. Whereas Brian Flores is dealing with the linebackers, broader defense, he's had to stand in front of the room and get them to believe in something. And so I do think that there's potential for him in that regard. But I think if what fans are looking for is the guy who's going to Herm Edwards it, right? Like, that's not his personality, okay? I don't know that he's Tony Dungy, but clearly it's not that type of personality that he's got there.
Right, and I think that came through pretty clearly in the press conference. He's not someone that's really going to yell his way. Although, I mean, I will say that has come through in the reporting, hasn't it? That it when people have talked about, his relationship with his players, I mean, he even said today, I was very hard on them being the safeties, and that he does yell at players a lot. So maybe he just didn't want to convey it. He didn't want to convey it publicly. He didn't want to stand in front of the room and go full Dan Campbell. I guess Dan Campbell is probably the coach that most demonstrated that sort of
Oklahoma drill.
Right, that sort of projecting of manliness and toughness and all that stuff. When really,
I mean, if the new the Man radio station, had a coach's show.
Oh my God,
it would be with Dan Campbell.
Yeah,
right?
I'm surprised the Man hasn't started doing Oklahoma drills between its hosts.
Right.
But
Orlando's going to run into a wall.
but I do think that kind of that projection of it in the press conferences, maybe not something he's interested in doing. Maybe he's that behind the scenes. I do think, and you mentioned this, I want to get into it, is what do you leave this with if you're a Dolphins fan? You kind of listen to a guy who obviously comes from New England. That's impressive. But again, there's that checkered history. Is not quite the guy that's going to be the savior at the quarterback position. Your team's talking, I definitely think the owner is kind of spearheading what is ultimately going to be, if not a tanking, then a serious rebuild.
And we need to talk about that.
Right. But so and then you also don't leave with that knowledge of what he did in New England that obviously spearheads this incredible defensive performance yesterday. What do you leave this with? And so if it's not, there's not a personality trait, there's not much of anything you really leave where you can at least see publicly. Again, some of the stuff can be total fool's gold. I think most of it is nonsense. But I think the fact that there wasn't really anything that you can grab onto and latch onto and say, all right, this is going to be the quality or the trait that I know my coach brings to the table, I do think can leave that feeling of underwhelming, even with a total incomplete answer. You don't know what he's like behind closed doors. We'll get back to today's episode of the 5 Reasons podcast in a second, but first I want to tell you about one of our great sponsors, and that is Doral Toyota. Doral Toyota, where you can find all your favorite Toyota models, whether you're looking for a new, used, or certified pre-owned vehicle. Doral Toyota is located at 9775 Northwest 12th Street, just a few blocks from International and Dolphin Malls. I've been there before. It is a fantastic location. Experience the Doral difference, which means 4 years complimentary maintenance and roadside assistance on all new vehicles. In-house financing is available for credit-related issues. If you mention 5 Reasons when you call 305-680-1129 or come in the dealership, you will work with a dedicated manager, not a salesman. Unlike other dealers, Doral Toyota prides itself on an honest and transparent buying process. That's Doral Toyota, DoralToyota.com, or stop in at 9775 Northwest 12th Street. Vamos, let's go, Doral Toyota.
Want to introduce you to another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that is Brunt Insurance, where you can get all of your protection under one roof. They offer home, auto, commercial, and life insurance. They're licensed to write insurance for the entire state of Florida. That's Pensacola all the way down to the Keys. They've got multiple carriers for all the product lines to ensure you're paying the lowest rate in your area. I can speak to this personally because I reached out to Greg Brunt. He told me, he said, send me all of your insurance policies. So I sent him life, I sent him auto, I sent him condo, I sent him house. He looked at all of them and he says, this one you're doing okay. Let's leave this one alone. On 2 of the policies, though, he saved me more than $700, and that's just for this 6-month term. So Greg can look at all your policies. He can find the right insurance company that will work for you, the right carrier, and he will get it done for you quickly, and you'll get your money quickly. Also, he's a proud sponsor of the Home for Heroes program, which offers special discounts for first responders, teachers, military, and healthcare professionals. Takes that very seriously. Call Greg at 954-589-2204. That's 954-589-2204, or go to bruntinsurance.com.
I thought Omar Kelly tried today to pin him down because he kept talking about his core philosophy, which just sounded to me like teamwork and hard work. Okay.
It's a TED Talk, right? I mean, it's
right.
It's a leadership conference kind of talk.
With even less, right, than you get in a TED Talk. And Omar pressed him on it, and he kind of spent 3 minutes to get around to exactly the same answer.
But we know what the answers to those questions are. It's discipline.
But what is that?
It's right, exactly.
What is discipline? I mean, Adam Gase's discipline, right, was sending away. Okay, was basically Adam Gase couldn't deal with strong. Okay, 2 different types of discipline.
Get on board or leave.
Right.
Basically.
Joe Philbin's discipline was, I'm not going to deal with anybody in the leadership committee because he didn't have the personality for it. He was too non-confrontational. They didn't respect him. Adam Gase's discipline, right, was we're going to dump a bunch of offensive linemen to make an example of him the first year.
Yeah.
And then after that,
big shows of discipline, basically.
Right. Jay Ajayi, Jarvis Landry, Mike Pouncey, the guys who don't totally get in line with me, we're going to ship them off. It always seemed to me as fraudulent. Okay, like Jimmy Johnson had a way of discipline, right? Okay, Jimmy used to talk about in Dallas, right? Jimmy always said there were different rules for different players. Kervin Richards fell asleep in a meeting, and he cut his ass, okay? If Emmitt Smith had fallen asleep in a meeting, he would not have cut his ass. Pat Riley was the same way. Todd Day talked back to Pat Riley at a practice. He didn't make it out of the practice, okay? Shaq talked back to Pat Riley plenty of times. Shaq made it to the next practice. I just...
But if Pat Riley was trying to explain that, I mean, so you read his book, right? You read his book.
Yes, too many times to count.
And so how would he explain it, and would it be any kind of satisfying other than just a collection of words?
No, I think Pat gave examples. I mean, if you read The Winner Within, you will get, what's happened with Riley the last couple of years is a subject for another day. But if you get into Winner Within, which was written during his time in New York, okay, so before he came to Miami, it was a big joke because everybody when Riley came here in, 94, and everybody was sitting outside waiting to meet him, there were like copies of The Winner Within that the writers had bought to impress him. Okay, they were reading him. And Pat has told me, and others, he wish he hadn't written that bleeping book. Okay, but...
Why?
Because he gets asked about it all the time.
Oh.
But it is, the thing about that book is that, it's kind of like me with the cast down here at the facility where 5,000 people had to hear about me walking off a curb the wrong way and spraining my ankle.
Unsatisfying story.
It's just not. I mean, I didn't do anything fascinating to get this. So I don't want everybody asked me. I appreciate the concern, and the cast is off tomorrow. Anyway, I hope. But I think the thing with Pat's book was there were specific examples. So he pulled examples from business. He pulled examples from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and from Magic Johnson and specific things that he did. Like things like for example, he had this thing called I think it was temporary insanity. It's like the act of temporary insanity. He named it something like the typical Riley thing. But it was like he would talk about how he would intentionally go crazy in front of the players to scare the living bleep out of them, okay, so that they knew it was possible that he would have that reaction to something. And you go back to a story that he doesn't tell in that book because it happened after, because it was in Miami, but the story everybody tells about Detroit, and we've talked about it on the podcast, okay, of him closing the door and having the bucket of water and sticking his face in the water and gasping for air and saying, this is how bad you need to bleep and want it, okay? Yeah. Like, those are things. Does Brian Flores do that stuff behind the scenes? I don't know,
right.
But Pat Riley started. He was a broadcaster. So, like, I feel like we want everybody to start and say they're a finished product. Brian Flores, has the right to come down here and evaluate his team and the personalities on this team and how he's going to relate to them. I do think a couple things help him, though. And we've talked about some of this, too. I do think the fact that he's a minority candidate will help him with a lot of the players. It's just the reality. 75% of the players in the NFL and on this team are African American. He's from Honduras, but
if any of them read, I mean, he grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and then, like, the third line of the SI story is him going, the soundtrack to my life is playing Biggie everywhere. I mean, what is that if not getting in with the players? But I do think that obviously, having that story and having that background, I mean, if any of the players are reading those stories, it's like, oh, okay.
Right.
I mean, it's a lot different. And
it's a lot different than having some quarterback genius.
And so I guess, I mean, isn't this really we're talking about, what do you want in a boss, right? Like we're talking about great characteristics of a boss, and in the end, they can only be words that are abstracts, right? So you just described stories of inspiration and discipline, and but if I just said those things to you, you'd be like, oh, that's totally empty TED Talk nonsense. And so I guess it can only happen in application, but the thing that's unsatisfying if you're a fan is that you don't really get to see that application. And so what are you going to judge him on if not this first year of results? And if this first year of results goes pear-shaped, almost as Stephen Ross wants it to be, then what do we do with this coach?
Well, I will say this: I was really surprised that no one asked specifically to Ross or Greer about tanking during their general sessions. Now Greer spoke. Actually, Greer didn't speak in the generals.
I was there, and there wasn't a ton about that particular.
There was
concept.
some talk about taking a quarterback.
Yeah,
but not as much about tanking and rebuilding, and that has been a storyline that I believe that the top levels of this organization have been putting out because they've been putting it out through certain people that they tend to put it out through.
Sure.
So that's kind of where I believe it comes from. And so I think when you look at it, you say, all right, you're bringing down a head coach, like you said, who's got to sort of assess the situation, try to figure out what's going to be best for him going forward. But you're in a situation where we know they're not going to win much next year. They're just not. And like you said, they may not be trying to. So I was a little surprised that nobody, because you can't press Flores on that. Like, what is he going to know? Like, why did you take this job when everybody talks about them tanking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, now, I guess you could ask.
You could. What is he going to say?
Right. Yeah. Right.
You
could in your meeting with Ross, did he go, well, we're thinking about tanking,
right.
and did that deter you from taking this job?
Right.
And clearly it didn't because he's here.
Well, and he said too that when he came out of the meeting and he felt very, very comfortable. He also said that he was not in a hurry to be a head coach, which I thought was interesting. I mean, he's young, so why should he be?
He's been a defensive coordinator for a year.
Right, so he was not in a hurry to be a head coach, but he did say about 4 years ago he thought he was relating to the players in a way that he thought it was possible for him long term. Obviously, Greer didn't get pressed about any of the other candidates. I do want to sidebar, though, to hit Greer's sidebar, because he does touch on some of this. He was asked a couple of questions which are important. One, he was asked about Ryan Tannehill, pretty point blank, by Joe Shad about, okay, there's been a lot of reports that he's not coming back. And Greer danced, as you would expect him to. They don't have to make a decision right now, and they may want a team to sweep in here and give them a sixth-round pick.
Correct.
So they're not going to do that. But the way he framed it was that the new coaching staff has a right to come in and evaluate him. I just thought the endorsement of Ryan was one of the weakest endorsements I've ever heard for somebody who's been here 7 years as the face of the franchise. He basically said to see if he could get anything out of him. Did you hear that phrase?
No, I did not.
Okay, I mean. So
what more is there left to get out of?
I don't know. I mean, to maybe see if it's worth keeping him as a backup if Ryan was going to take an enormous pay cut, I guess. But there are enough jobs around the NFL. I mean, I think Cincinnati, I think Carolina, there could be a backup possibility. There's enough jobs around the NFL that Ryan's going to least
in a backup role.
In a backup role. Now he could get a caretaker role somewhere. I think.
I don't know where that place is.
I mean, could you bring him into Cincy? Could he beat out Andy Dalton? I don't want to veer off into a Tannehill space here, but could he beat out Andy Dalton in training camp? Maybe. Probably not.
Maybe. I have heard Cincy talked about with Tannehill.
Yeah. I mean, so that's an option. But so he danced around.
And remember, the head coach there now is Zach Taylor, who used to be the quarterback's coach here.
Right.
Yeah. So he might bring him in there. So
you can bring him there, and then maybe if Andy has a bad camp, I mean, they're not going anywhere with Andy Dalton. They're not going anywhere with Ryan.
What does the Tannehill contract look like on the free agent market? Is it like $8 million, $10 million, $12 million?
I think it depends if he's your caretaker or not. If he's going to be what Josh McCown was for the Jets a couple of years ago, then it could be up around $8 million.
I mean, Sam Bradford got 20 to do this job last year.
And then was cut. But the other thing that Greer said that I do want to hit on was he said something interesting, and he volunteered it. He was not asked this.
Sure.
He talked about how the last two times they hired full-time head coaches, they had a really good first season.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember, Sperano, Wildcat, 11-5, and then didn't have a 500 or better season after that.
Mm-hmm.
And then Philbin, not Philbin, but Gase,
Sure.
10-6. And then it got worse from there. And so he was pressed on that to say, well, did it hurt you? I think Omar asked, did it hurt you going forward that you were better that first year? And he framed that as no, but we didn't really build the foundation. We knew we needed pieces. And both of those years were fool's gold. If you look back at them. The 2008 season, Chad Pennington played a perfect season. You got him off the scrap heap
and he was never going to come back and be fully healthy, or like that was his last.
That was the last.
Going to be his last great season.
I mean, they did not have a lot of elite talent on that roster. They caught lightning in a bottle with a Wildcat. They had a very soft schedule. There was a 6-week period of that schedule where they didn't play a starting quarterback.
I remember that. Yeah,
and
I remember like they won by like they weren't scoring any points.
Very small margins. Yeah. The best win of the year ultimately was win.
And we just know, right? Like
right.
when you watch the Chiefs this year, you go, oh, that's the start of a new era, right? When you watched, the first year of the Dolphins under Adam Gase, as fun as it was,
right?
I mean, you didn't go into the next year thinking, well, now they're going to build on that and get to the second round of the playoffs or the third round of the playoffs.
I think some people thought there was a chance. I think the Tannehill injury blew that up, and that's the only thing that's unfair to Gase. I mean, I thought I was fair to Gase the third year, and it played out, but the second year, I understood it, but. I just think I think the way they're going to frame this is this, that they're trying to make a sustained run here, and so they're not going to spend big money on free agents.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it's going to be an intentional tank, but I just think it's going to be not giving this coaching staff the resources to win big early. I think decisions are going to be made based on how this is going to look in 2 or 3 years, not this year. Will there be some accidental winning? Perhaps, okay? And I think what you want to see from Brian Flores this year are the players playing hard. Mm-hmm. Are they responding to him? Okay, is he handling clock management correctly? That was a big issue for Tony Sperano that first year. It was a big issue for Saban. Okay, he had some timeout gaffes that people don't remember, just dealing with the pro game.
And to me, the funniest thing about the head coaching analysis is that fans focus so much on that stuff because it's the most relatable thing of coaching. We don't know shit about 3-4 defenses and 11 personnel and all these different ways. And obviously, we have people in our network that do, but that's generally not fans. The fans sit in front of
not everybody's on
right. Not everyone's CK. They sit on a couch and they go, "How come he's not calling a timeout?"
Right.
Because you've run that situation in Madden 1,000 times, and yet I don't think coaches really give it that much thought. I really don't. I don't think Brian Flores is sitting around going, well, while I'm calling this defense, I think I would call a timeout there. No, it's such an ancillary part of the game to them compared to the strategy.
About Adam Gase that really, for all of Adam Gase's flaws, which I documented clearly here, he wasn't that bad at clock management.
Well, because he handed off to Darren Rizzi. He didn't do it.
He didn't do it.
He just didn't do it.
Right.
Because again. That's how little some guys in the business care about that stuff,
and yet it is probably the reason Andy Reid doesn't have a Super Bowl.
Correct, and it's
probably the reason why Herm Edwards is coaching at Arizona State.
And it's the first thing you think of with Andy Reid, right? Andy Reid in a playoff game. What are you saying? Clock management,
right?
And it's such an ancillary part of the game to them, because they're focusing hundreds of hours a week on strategy. And so, you're right though. I mean, in terms of you want to see right head coaching things, but if they go 3-13. Is anyone going to feel good about him? Right?
I just hope he doesn't get Steve Wilkes. Okay,
right.
That's my thing because that was a minority head coach goes to Arizona, clear tier down. In that case, rookie quarterback.
Yeah.
Paring down their talent.
No skill talent whatsoever.
No, other than running back, and he wasn't totally healthy.
Right.
Larry Fitzgerald is old.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, defensive talent. A lot of their better defensive players didn't want to be there anymore, and then he inherits that. And the thing totally collapses, and now they go out and hire Cliff Kingsbury after a failed college head coaching career.
Yeah,
that's what now.
But I will say it's possible, isn't it?
I will be hard on them if they do that, though.
Sure,
okay? And I think we all should be
because the owner is saying it.
Right. If the owner goes back on this now, okay. Yep. There is no way you can fire Brian Flores after 1 year.
Which, by the way, he wouldn't be the first though, because the Sixers owner lost the stomach for it. There have been a lot of owners and GMs that have lost the stomach for this.
And it's different. Well, Cleveland, they lost the stomach for it. They fired Sashi Brown. Okay, now I think, but Ross has said it from the very beginning, And at this point, he has to give Brian Flores 2 years. Okay, you cannot fire him after
Probably
1
gotta give
year.
him 3 years.
Well, he should. He should. We'll see how it goes. But to me, the second year should be guaranteed here. He can't build a program with what they're trying to do in one season, all right? And the reality is they've brought in, and they didn't name them all today, but the Jim Caldwells of the world and others, they have experienced people here on the staff to help him, to guide him, okay? I do think he's going to – a couple things I think – and the beat guys have already talked about this. I think this is true. He's going to be very tight with information, very Patriots-like in that way. It may frustrate some fans. It's going to frustrate some media. It's not the first time that's happened in this organization. Nick Saban didn't let anything get out. Parcells' regime didn't let anything get out. Okay, so I hope for his sake, this would be some advice for the coaches. I play it straight. Don't play favorites, and because you'll do better that way. That's just my personal opinion from being 20 years in the media down here. The guys who've played favorites have not fared well. But I just think that you have to, as fans, I think we have to look at this first year and just look for small signs. You're not looking at the big picture yet because you can't really see it, right? You can't really see it. And you don't want situations where you're just patching. They've gotten Mike Tannenbaum. I think he's got a stapler over there in the back room, okay, behind the media room. He's out of the picture now. There'll be a press release sent out in a month or two that he's pursuing other opportunities.
Yep.
He'll be an agent for some NBA coach.
Yeah,
okay?
he'll be resuming his agency business
right,
or whatever.
So that's over with. You're not going to go after the big-name guys. They got away from that last year anyway. So I think but here's my message to Dolphin fans, okay? If you're going to say you're okay with a rebuild and that the Dolphins needed to do this and that the Heat need to do this, right, and that the Marlins are finally maybe doing this right, we'll see. If you're going to take that approach, then you can't be chasing squirrels. Every time that a Le'Veon Bell or an Antonio Brown, okay, or any of these guys is out there, you can't be flooding Twitter and everywhere else and asking people like me and others at CK, like, well, why can't the Dolphins get that guy? They just had to give up a 4th-round pick. If you're committed to this, you're committed to this.
Correct.
No Le'Veon Bells, no Antonio Browns. I don't care if he's from here. If you're going to build this thing the right way, you build it the right way. You clear the space for your young players to play. You build it through the draft, and you commit to this head coach for at least 2 years. If they do that, then I'm not going to be that hard on them as long as I see that they're at least taking that approach.
Sure. Now, here's my question. What happens if they go 3-13 next year, and at 1-8, the fans start bitching? Right, because
they will.
Right, and like it's the same old. Because again, you mentioned the Marlins. The Marlins are actually probably doing the right thing, right? And as crappy as that is to admit, and as much as you probably don't want to go and see it or watch it on television, I know because I really didn't last year. I didn't invest almost
I watched
any
3 games
almost
in totality
any
unless
of my
I was
time.
there.
But they're probably doing the right thing, right? They're building an organization from the ground up. And look, as much as we want them to spend money so that they can drag us out there, when the Marlins spent money in 2012, we didn't go, right? And as we don't want to admit that.
They had an all-star outfield 2 years ago and nobody went.
Correct. They had Giancarlo Stanton and Jose Fernandez pitching every 5th day.
They had the future MVP Christian Yelich.
They
had
two
Marcelo Ozuna.
2 future MVPs.
Right.
I mean, they had so much going on. And look, they weren't a playoff team, but they had good players, and you could have gone, and you didn't. And so the Marlins are probably doing the right thing. The Dolphins are probably doing the right thing, but they've got 17 years worth of fans. I knew fans. We know fans that didn't even enjoy when they made the playoffs 3 years ago. It was like, oh, but they were frauds anyway. But it's like you're not even going to enjoy winning. So what is it going to be like? Are fans actually going to be accepting of an experience? Is it going to be communicated well enough? Because you can't really get in front of a podium and go, well, we're trying to lose next year. And are you succeeding by failing? Are fans going to be okay with it in large numbers? Are they going to go to the stadium? Are they going to watch on television, losing after losing after losing, and not have a go at the coach, and not have a go at everyone involved in the organization? Because ultimately, that is the thing that causes owners and GMs to lose the stomach for it, is because every week you go out there and watch your team lose, you get pissed off, the fans get pissed off, and there's this cycle of everyone being angry to the point where, all right, we got to try something else. And so,
which is what happened this year, but they weren't rebuilding, and I think that's different. I think that is why they're trying to get out in front of it. It's a little odd when you're trying to sell tickets and you're making it clear to people, and you just brought in a head coach who's not a big personality,
correct,
and you're not going to draft a quarterback. Wait until they pass on Kyler Murray.
Right.
Wait until that happens, because there's going to be a contingent, not
and
just
if
CK,
he's good, and if
he's good, wait until they pass on Kyler Murray and they decide that they're going to wait a year.
Why wouldn't you try it? Because
I would try it, but I mean Ben Albright laughed in my face on that. But
and his theory, and I wish I just only being confrontational when we were asking of people's time. But my retort was DeShone Kizer. DeShone Kizer was drafted in the first round by the Browns.
Right.
He was terrible. and they drafted. I think was Baker Mayfield the next year.
Yeah,
they drafted Baker the next year. I mean, they drafted Cody Kessler in the third round, and he was basically a foregone. He's gone by game 8 of his first year, which I think is harsh. But I do wonder, like, why couldn't they take a quarterback? If anything, if your quarterback is bad, then you're probably more likely to go 2-14, which is your end goal anyway.
Right, if you're going to play him right away, and then
which is what you do, right?
Well, you throw him out there. I don't know if it's fair to someone like Kyler Murray. We'll see to adjust to sort of the size difference he's going to have to deal with in the NFL. But look, I would do it, but you and I need to then, if we're going to say that, and we're also saying they need to tank. I understand that might be a reason to tank. Okay, but here's the other problem. If you draft a Kyler Murray in the first round, not that contracts are where they were before, but you're still going to be paying that guy a significant amount of money. Not like you'd be paying a starting quarterback you get on the open market, but still something to be a quarterback, and you're burning the pick for that you wouldn't take another position. You know me, I'm in favor of taking a quarterback every year, if not 2. Okay, I've been saying that
because
for years
what's the
and
point
years
of all this if you don't have a quarterback?
Correct. So you just keep burning. If you're going to burn picks, stop burning them on guards. Okay, just take a shot at a quarterback. So I understand the rationale for that. I've presented that case, but I'm also going to have to pull back a little bit and say if they don't do that, okay, and they want to build in the trenches first, and they potentially have a Pro Bowl, right tackle in 3 years, that maybe that's worth it, okay, or a defensive tackle who they don't have to go out and pay an Ndamukong Suh, but he becomes something like an Ndamukong Suh. I think we just have to step back a little bit and have some patience with.
Hey, it's Seth Levitt here from the Fish Tank with my main man,
O.J. McDuffie, the Juice.
And Juice, we've got a special guest over the next 2 weeks in the tank.
What's up, everybody? It's Pat Surtain, and I'm officially diving into the Fish Tank. If he was better than Peyton, he definitely wasn't better than me.
Oh, there
so
we
that's
go.
what I wanted to get
Yeah, that's where we're going with it.
Did you and Peyton ever play against each other in high school?
Absolutely. Beat him 35-7.
35 to
Get out of
7.
here.
Oh, yeah. I had 3 rushing and 2 passing on him, accounted for all 5 touchdowns.
Had hands in all of them.
Yeah.
Hey, Pat came in here saying he doesn't remember stuff, but he remembered all
remember
of
that.
Make sure you dive into the tank to hear our entire interview with Patrick Surtain here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. You can catch up on what you've missed and hear new episodes every 2 weeks until July by searching The Fish Tank on Apple Music, Google Play, Podbean, Spotify, or wherever else you find your favorite podcasts.
I do think the one difference between this and the Marlins, and this is not Derek Jeter's fault, but there's still the stain on the Marlins for not spending.
Right.
Even though you mentioned they did a couple of years, but even that was not huge payroll.
Right.
Okay?
And they gave it 3 months, and Ozzie Guillen was had screwed it up before it even started.
Right. I mean, he starts mentioning Castro in the first 5 minutes he's here, but not smart. But although Ozzie would have been fun if he'd stayed here longer. But that to me that's the difference. Jeter is paying for a certain regard for Luria's sins, but also the Marlins could have, and we've had this debate many times, spent more money at first. And so I think there's a lack of trust. Nobody has seen Bruce Sherman and Derek Jeter spend. We have seen Steve Ross spend.
Correct.
That's not the issue with him, okay? In fact, I would argue that of the owners down here, of the 4 owners, he is the most likely to spend because Mickey at times has pulled it back a little bit, and I believe we're going to see that this week. Understandable when he probably dumps Wayne Allington to get or someone else to get under the tax.
I think he's the most desperate to win. I really do.
Yes.
Like I think Stephen Ross is desperate.
Well, he didn't experience the big 3,
right?
And not only did he not experience it, but he was fighting it.
Right,
like,
exactly.
It was like
he's fighting for relevance
he was
while
fighting
this
for
is
relevance
happening.
to the point that when the year LeBron was gone, well, the Heat don't matter anymore. He said at a press conference.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you, that belief irritates the Heat.
Yes.
Okay. You talk to Heat officials about
that. They're all competitive, and I'm sure things that the Heat do, piss the Dolphins off.
I will say this, and I don't know if I revealed this on a pod before. The angriest the Heat have been at me in the last 20 years was when I wrote a column comparing them to the Dolphins. Okay.
Yeah.
So there is that perception there of not of frugality, but of incompetence.
Correct. Right.
That
exactly.
the Heat have not had until the last 3 years.
Stephen Ross will throw if this was a non-salary cap sport. Right. He might have a $500 million payroll to try and win 13 games and win the Super Bowl. He would do everything possible to try, but they're in a salary cap system. They can't, so they have to find competency. And that's the thing that they've most struggled at for 10 years.
Right.
And I guess if there's hope today, I guess it is that Stephen Ross did not try and do the hot thing and get the offensive guy that's going to fix the quarterback or find the quarterback. He's just looking for competency in this organization from Chris Greer and from Brian Flores to lead this thing in the right direction. If that right direction is losing for a year so we can find Tua Tagovailoa so we can win a lot in the future, then that's the right strategy. But I'm just curious what the strategy is from their vantage point, and because I'm someone who advocates for this kind of strategy from NBA teams, and to a lesser extent from NFL teams, just because I think it's harder, and the results are less guaranteed, right? If you draft a guy first overall, if you're drafting Zion Williamson, you're probably getting a very good player. If you draft the first quarterback in the draft, it's kind of a crapshoot.
Right.
And so I don't know if you're going to have that level of success. I will say, though, if you lose a lot, you're guaranteed to get the first pick as opposed to being in a lottery. But I do think, as someone who advocates for this, I just have seen everywhere fans, ownership, lose the stomach for it. And so my hope is that this is coming from owner. I hope that Stephen Ross is leaking to Adam Schefter. We're looking at quarterbacks in 2020. I hope he's leaking this. I hope he's leaking it because then it's his idea, and he's going to have to stick to it because I think it'll work. I really do. I think if the Dolphins this year go 2-14, get the first pick in the draft, and draft Tua Tagovailoa first overall, they will fix their organization. I am convinced of it.
You're more confident about this than me. I think it's the right approach.
Yeah,
but I've been around here too damn long. Okay, okay. I started covering this team in '96. All right,
right.
I think it's the right approach.
Yeah,
I think the fans may be more patient about it because I think what bothered them so much this last year about this team was that there was an arrogance that was still coming out of this organization, emanating from the head coach, that was unearned. And there was also a quarterback that they just had enough of.
Right.
Okay? And not his
it's
fault.
Such a Groundhog Day. It's such a Groundhog Day team.
He carried himself the right way. So this is nothing against Ryan Tannehill.
He pushed to injury when he probably shouldn't have.
Injury. He deserves a lot of credit for that. And we should, really, honestly, when it's official, we should do a podcast with some kind of a tribute to him. We'll find something, okay? Because I do.
It's toughness, really.
It's toughness. Yeah. But there were things there that you should appreciate. But it was enough. It was enough. We didn't want to see it anymore. The fans didn't want to see it. And particularly because then you had a head coach who wasn't taking responsibility for anything. He was supposed to be a guru of something that was not good, okay? And when you just saw the picture, the iconic picture from the Gase, the Gase tenure is going to be that picture of Ross Marino and Tannenbaum sitting up in the press box, okay, where Tannenbaum's kind of looking away. Marino looks disgusted. By the way, Danny today nearly fell down the stairs. First, they had a name tag for his chair. I'm not sure that was necessary. Don't you just leave the one chair open and Dan picks it?
No, but what if you go down the stairs and you sit down in Dan's chair?
Then he tells you to get the fuck up. Okay?
Yeah, probably.
By the way, I could say this, and you can leave that one, because he cursed on the way up the stairs because the stairs, and I'm trying to deal with the crutches, but the stairs in the auditorium are a little steep.
It's like two
Sloped.
steps. It's two steps per stair.
Right.
You got to take a step, and then another stair.
And the great Dan Marino stumbled on his way up and cursed at the air.
Yeah.
But that's the picture. It's Ross, it's Tannenbaum, and it's Marino, and it was over. And I was watching, when Flores was speaking, I was watching Danny. And Flores is not inspiring in that setting.
No.
I wouldn't say Danny looked bored, because he can look bored a lot. I've seen him on a bench in Mobile. He can look bored. But again, this wasn't something. Again, talking kind of low into the mic.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that changes a little bit. But one anecdote before we close here. I mean, to tell you how different it is. Jimmy Johnson out here, first day training camp. We're sitting out here right now. Okay. There were lines. I mean, this is before they had the garage here. Before they had the Nick Saban Memorial Bubble that's right behind us.
Yeah.
I mean, it was as far as you could see. People beyond people, beyond people, beyond people. That's when there was still hope in this organization. That's when they went with Don Shula's last 4 years. There were 14 games over 500. He got run out of town, okay, because there was somebody better who came along. That's how people felt about Jimmy Johnson, okay? Nick Saban, again, there was that thing. I wrote a column about Camp Cameron's first day. There was nobody here. It's like people knew. I'm curious. First day of training camp out here this year, if they don't get a premium quarterback, if it's Jake Rudock, okay, and David Fales and Luke Falk, okay, some combination, okay, out here, what does training camp look like out here this season. It was not that crowded last year. I was out here 3 or 4 times. It
no,
was
I
not
mean,
that busy.
and I think it'll be the same this year. I think fans. I'd be curious, what their engagement numbers are telling them, and what and all this stuff about today's press conference, what it's like, how it's received on local news, where it's going to be covered, how many people are watching NFL Network, how many people are listening to this podcast, because I'm curious if there is just this sense that's going to permeate through Dolphins fandom for years of just prove it to me.
Right.
Just wake me when you've proven that you can win consistently, and then I'll show up. But until then, don't ask me to come to training camp for the first day. I'm probably not going to be buying season tickets. I'll watch on Sundays, and I'll complain a lot. Like, there's just this vast swath of Dolphins fans. They're just prove it to me. Not that you're winning and this is a flash in the pan, you're winning on this day, but that you're like the Patriots, you're like the Chiefs, you're like the Rams that beat the crap out of teams every Sunday, right? And until the Dolphins get to that stage, I don't think there's a coach that they can hire. I really do. I mean, they hired Bill Parcells and Nick Saban,
right?
And it didn't work.
Right.
There is no coach or front office executive by reputation. I think if they traded for Sean McVay tomorrow, I don't think there would be the sense of, all right, it's fixed, let's go. Like, there isn't a person alive other than Bill Belichick that can come in here and you go, all right, this is going to be fixed, and we have this huge level of excitement.
Yeah, well, I think part of that is the sports town in general, right?
Sure.
And I wonder how that plays into it, because the Marlins are in full rebuild. The Heat are in purgatory. The Panthers are disappointing, so they became irrelevant again this season.
Yep.
The Canes seem to be the ones with the enthusiasm back because they've got, they've worked the recruiting portal and they hired the right guy.
Yeah.
Okay. In Manny Diaz, like the Canes caught a break.
Yes, they did.
With Mark Richt.
Yes, they did.
Stepping aside. We're gonna get into that next week and talk a little bit more about them. But I just think that I'll be interested. Is the sports fan in South Florida tuning out completely?
Yeah.
Like, just done with the whole damn thing because it's so bad? I mean, the Patriots, Boston teams don't go 100 days without championships anymore.
Right. It's wake me. It's wake me, right? It's wake me when things have actually
turned
turned around.
Will that help the Dolphins? Because if everything else is not exciting, look, the Dolphins would be very easy to ignore right now for a lot of people if the Heat still had LeBron or if they had Prime Wade, okay, or they traded for Jimmy Butler. It would be very easy to ignore. And a lot of this is media. A lot of this is the guys that we see at everything, right? The TV guys, okay, the columnists, there are only like a couple left, but the mainstream media guys down here, where do they go, right? Where they got to go somewhere.
Yeah.
They got to cover something, and the Heat are just not compelling right now. And so I think that does help the Dolphins a little bit get off the mat with the Panthers and Marlins being sort of irrelevant. I think Manny's camp is going to get a lot of attention, with the Canes this year, but it's just a dead time. And even your team hasn't started yet. The Beckham team hasn't started yet.
So what would Brian Flores have to do? Or what would this organization have to do to have a first month like Manny Diaz just had? Because he I
don't think they can get it.
I'll speak from a personal standpoint. I was thinking about maybe not renewing my Kane season tickets for next year, and that month convinced me to do it. I call my dad and I go, "We're going to do it. We're going to go back." And by the way, the home schedule next year for UM is horrendous.
Right.
In terms of going to games that are going to be compelling, it's going to be awful. But I looked around and I went, I don't want to lose these tickets for when they turn things around in 2 years. They're home with FSU and it'll be better. They convinced me in a month. Is there anything the Dolphins could do?
I don't think so. I mean, it would have to be quarterback, and there's nothing out there in free agency that would do that, so why bother? Why bother? Like Kyler Murray, maybe. That's the only thing I can think of, potentially. But there's nothing else they can do. There's no premium free agent, okay? Getting rid of Tannehill alone is not going to do it. Xavier Howard, coming to contract terms with him, I want them to do that, but that's not going to do it. Getting Rashad Jones to be happier with the situation now, that's not going to – there's nothing that Brian Flores can do. You're right. It is a prove-it stage. But like I said, the eyeballs – what I'm curious about from a Miami sports town, and I'm personally curious about this because we started a damn sports network in Miami, okay? And we have a website coming in the next 3 or 4 weeks, okay? I've been saying that for the last 3 to 4 months. But what I'm curious about at this stage is do – Miami sports fans find the team to go to where they find hope, or do they just ignore sports entirely? In a city like Boston or New York or Los Angeles, I don't know. But New York, Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, St. Louis.
I will say New York's a bit like that now. I mean, what
do
they have?
No, but they go to the Yankees, okay? And
Yeah.
it's not just that. They'll go to a team, okay? They'll find a team. The Rangers had it for a little bit when they were a little better. In New York,
I guess the Garden is always full, no matter what the Knicks are doing.
Right, okay? And even now, they're going to sell themselves on Zion Williamson, okay?
And Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving.
Right. So but in New York, they'll go somewhere, right? In cities like, in Dallas, they'll go somewhere. In cities like Miami and Atlanta, even D.C. to an extent, they don't. They may just tune out. They may just decide sports are not. There's enough to do. You and I are sitting out here. I mean, we're sitting out here. It's February 4th. We're sitting outside at almost 7 o'clock with planes going above us. It's 78 degrees, okay, and breezy. There's other shit to do down here.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering at what point, like our numbers, I can speak, we've stayed pretty consistent. Okay, we're new, but it's not a great time to be a sports network down here. It's not a great time to be in general sports media. It's not a great time to be a sports fan. And so I do think that there's a jockeying for position with the different teams. And I think that the other teams, because when you talk to the other teams, you get this from them, okay, all of them.
Right, because they want to assert themselves as the premier option.
They're hopeful that the Heat stay in a rut for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because the Heat are most capable with their group in their front office and their coach to figure it out eventually, okay? The Heat basically put themselves – it's like when you play Madden, okay, or NBA 2K, and you put yourself in, like, championship mode for the very beginning. The Heat made it as difficult as they possibly could. They basically dumped themselves in a maze, okay, that was filled with, like – with snakes, okay, and alligators, okay, and loan sharks. Okay?
Fire is chasing you.
Right. They put themselves in the most difficult position they possibly could. It's like, and then they handcuffed their hands behind their back, okay, and they blindfolded themselves and said, hey, let's find it to the other side because we're the Heat, we can do that. They did this to themselves.
Yep.
The only way that the Heat could not be number one in this town at this stage with what's going on with the Dolphins, even the Dolphins, and with the Panthers, and with the Marlins, and with the Canes, was if they totally bleep themselves, and they did. And so I think these other teams are looking at this like, okay, here's an opportunity. It buys us a little bit of time. If we can just sell hope, all right? Because I don't know if Pat Riley can even sell hope right now.
He can't.
All he can say is, okay, these contracts are going to be gone in 2021, right? Like that's
or,
all he
or
has.
that because of the NBA, there's always going to be guys available, and Miami is always going to be in the top 5 of destinations for one of these teams.
Right,
like
and we only need 2, right? We only need 2. We don't need the whole thing. We need 2, and I'll find some Rodney McGruders to put around him. We need 2, and so they're gonna. That's been the sale. But what happens if Pat walks away? What happens if Spo walks away? What happens if you're 2 years into this and you're still, your hope is that Hassan Whiteside and Tyler Johnson are expiring contracts? I don't want to deviate too much, but it does. You have to put the Dolphins in the total context here, and there is a window. Just as there this year was a window for the Panthers just to get to the bottom stage of relevancy.
Correct.
And they bleeped it up.
Yes.
Okay? And so I just think...
Just as, by the way, I'm very much looking forward to having soccer in Miami. The fact that they've taken 6 years to get off the ground bleeped up what could have been an obvious head start.
Yes, absolutely.
Like we could have been talking about soccer, what they're doing in the MLS transfer market. Like that could have been happening because there's someone waiting.
You just want to get to your Nigel voice.
No,
I'm not letting you. I'm not letting you.
No, I really do believe that they missed a huge opportunity by not being able to work politics. And
absolutely, but at least it looks like it's starting, so that's good.
Sure.
But look, UM basketball this year, no fault of their own.
Correct.
Had an opportunity to be somewhat relevant.
They got wrecked by the FBI.
Got wrecked by the FBI, and that's total bogus, the way that was handled. So I guess total takeaway, we'll finish here. Total takeaway on this is Brian Flores not going to blow anybody away as a speaker. Dolphins not really going to do anything splashy in free agency. And the question is this, we'll leave you with this. How long are you willing to wait?